recording. So welcome everyone to this morning's co-chair meeting. I put together a brief agenda. I just wanted to welcome everyone to the meeting and let you know that we're going to talk about an estimated timeline for subcommittee meetings, reminders for all of the co-chairs, and then provide you time to have an open discussion around your subcommittees so that you actually can collaborate or discuss things as co-chairs in a joint situation. Just as a reminder, here are the norms. I'm not going to go through these. We have gone through these multiple times, but just to have them here and available for reference. And then also reminding us of our guiding principles, making sure that things that we talk about, we have students in mind and that they would be measurable in an authentic setting. So reminding you of those two guiding principles for this work. So we had talked with Chairman Miller not too long ago, and I talked to him about an estimated timeline. And so this estimated timeline would allow all of subcommittees to have 3 more meetings. So you would have a meeting in May, June, and July. And for this estimated timeline, it is thought that PEPSC would be presented to during the August meeting as a full commission during that monthly meeting. And ideally, then PEPSC would approve it in September. Then it would advance to the state board in October. And depending on discussion during October, it could be approved in either November or December. So I really want to reiterate the fact that there are 3 more subcommittee meetings where you can think about what you're going to discuss with your subcommittee members. Any question about the timeline?
Kim, are we going to talk
Yes.
at this point about what form or format what we present to PEPSC that then goes forward to the state board? Will that be a narrative document? What are we thinking that's going to look like?
I would think it would be very similar to the PowerPoint slides that have been presented to them.
Okay.
But revised with whatever changes each of the subcommittees decide on.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. And now just a few reminders. I just really want to stress that the goal of these subcommittee meetings is to really focus, now that all the members have been introduced to the current draft model, that we really focus on if we are making any changes, revisions, and determine what those are and decide what to make those decisions for the areas within the buckets of your subcommittee for this current model. Because there are only 3 more meetings and we want to make sure that we have the time to make those changes if that is the wish of your subcommittee members. And then also, I want you to really focus on your priority buckets, and we'll go over those in the next slide. However, if your subcommittee has feedback on another subcommittee's priorities or responsibilities, please let me know. And I find that I end up knowing this from either the subcommittee meetings or the pre-planning meetings, what the feedback would be, and I will make sure that it gets to the correct subcommittee. So then they can consider that extra feedback from another subcommittee.
Hey, Kim, this is Maureen.
Yes, yes.
I've been getting some pretty significant feedback from teachers in the field through email, and then also just from trying to glean what I can from social media. And I've been putting that all into a spreadsheet that's just got tabs across the bottom for like which subcommittee I think that falls under.
Oh,
And
sure.
I'm happy to share that with you and share that with all the co-chairs so that they can see the feedback that's specific to their subcommittee, but then also they can take a look at the other feedback that I've gathered as well and see if anything on those other lists also would directly relate to the conversations they're having in their meetings.
Oh, Maureen, that would be fantastic. If you could share that, that would be
Yep,
fantastic.
absolutely.
Thank you. And the third bullet is that quorum is not needed to finalize any changes within subcommittee decisions. That will definitely be needed for the full commission during monthly meetings, but that is not needed for subcommittee decisions. And then last of all, Van kind of focused on this, but the draft that will be considered by PEPSC will be after these three subcommittee meetings. So I just wanted to make sure that these reminders were here. There have been questions in the past about some of these things, and I just wanted it out in the open and for everyone to have in their minds. And just as a reminder, these are the subcommittee responsibilities and priorities. I'm going to give everybody a chance to be able to look over these. We can even refer to these in the next part of the meeting. And you can think about if your subcommittee wants to give feedback or is concerned about a certain area that's not within your subcommittee, that you know which subcommittee that would belong to, and I can make sure to get that feedback to that subcommittee in a timely manner. And then last of all, I just want to give you an opportunity to have an open discussion and bring out any questions, concerns, thoughts to the group as a whole so that you can think about as co-chairs for your future planning for those next three meetings, what you want to focus on, and if you have questions that you think you could bounce off other co-chairs or that you need to get feedback from the whole group.
Hey, Kim, this is Maureen, and I do have a couple of things that I would love to bring up to the whole group if that's okay.
Sure.
So the first one is, like I said, I've been trying to collect as much feedback as possible from teachers and trying to clarify some misconceptions when I've been able to do that for some teachers. And there's a couple of common trends. And like I said, I'll have specific feedback for each one of the co-chairs that relates directly to their specific responsibilities and their buckets that they're working on. But just kind of in general, there's a few kind of like things that are coming up pretty consistently that I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of. So the first one is, there has been some misinformation that has gone out, and that's caused a lot of confusion, I think. And appropriately so, because the information that we've given so far is a draft. And so there's a lot of questions about, well, how does that look? How does that look for me? But I think one thing that we really need to do as the co-chairs of the subcommittees is to have a very consistent, concise, and collaborative definition of kind of what this project is about, what we've been working on, and what the end result should be. Just to make sure that when we're talking to people, we're all delivering the same message. Another thing that I think too is that we really need to develop some kind of systematic way to collect the feedback. And Julie Pittman's working on that right now to come up with some ways to connect with teachers across the state to be able to gather that information and get feedback from teachers through multiple listening tours and just some information sessions. Another thing too, I think we need to do is consider maybe change. We've been saying outcome based, and we've been saying impact based, and we've been saying effectiveness. And unfortunately, for a lot of teachers, hearing those words immediately ties back to EVOS. And I've seen a lot of feedback where teachers are concerned that this is going to be directly tied to EVOS. And if you don't have an EVOS score, your only other option for showing that you're an effective practitioner is by having student surveys and peer surveys. And so I really think that maybe if we thought about changing that language, and one idea that I came up with was, what about if we said that you're able to demonstrate that you're continuously improving your students over the school year? That's really what we're looking at, because we're not looking at like a single measure on one day for any of the options for showing that you're an effective practitioner. We're really looking at, is a kid that came into your class on day one better on day 180 because you were their teacher? And so I thought maybe if we change the language, that might make that piece a little bit clearer for teachers. So it's not quite as that there's not the tendency to assume that it goes to EVOS. I think we also really need to come up with some specific language to clarify why this is not merit pay, and to explain that this is actually the CE and the AL teachers are not getting merit pay. They're getting paid for doing additional duties and taking on additional workload. So they're being compensated for their work that they're actually doing. It's not merit pay. Also, I think clarifying that the ALs are not going to be full-time teaching with students, and also trying to full-time mentor, co-teach, model teach, work with other teachers, that their job will be to be a AL teacher. And that means that they're not going to be trying to teach 90 students or 25 students, whatever their normal course load would be, depending on their grade level. They're not going to be teaching all those kids and then also working with the teachers in their school. Their primary job would be working with the teachers in their school. And then also try to help people understand about the National Board Certified Teacher. And Tom, hopefully I have this right, that's a completely different statute. And so that is not going to be affected by the work that we're doing. That is money that is allocated through a completely different law. And then really, I think also helping people understand what the student surveys and what the peer surveys are, and maybe giving examples of what some of those questions would be, and also providing some access, like maybe like through a Google folder, or we drop links to people, but of the research behind those that demonstrates that is an excellent way to predict student outcomes, is by using those, and that those are all research based. So it's not asking, is Miss Stover nice to you on Tuesdays, or did Miss Stover take away your cell phone? They're questions that are research based, that are specifically designed to analyze the impact that a teacher has on a student, and enabling that student to grow in their class. And then the final one, sorry, I had so many, guys. I wrote them down so I wouldn't forget anything. But the final one I had was to really help teachers and all stakeholders understand that this is collaborative. It is not a competitive way to look at teacher licensure. And it's collaborative because it's going to enable teachers to improve the teaching profession from within. So you're going to have the AL teachers who are working with their colleagues, they're trained to work with their colleagues, and they have the skill set to work with their colleagues, to help their colleagues use reflection to determine where they can improve in their teaching practice, and then be with them throughout that modification they're making to their teaching practice to support them so that they are better the next year. And an example I've kind of been using is, let's say I have struggled working with ELL students, and I have a colleague who is an adult leadership teacher who can come in and watch me teach my ELL students, help me reflect on teaching my ELL students, then work with me to determine what strategies and methods might work better for me in helping my ELL students. Then we can reflect on that again and see if that change in my practice caused an improvement for me in working with my students. If it does, then I continue on that. If it doesn't, we work together to figure out another strategy or method that I could use. And so by the end of that school year, I'm better working with my ELL students, and going into the next school year, I become even better. And I think that's the real opportunity of this, is it's helping the teachers in our state be able to improve their teaching practice on a daily basis through continuous improvement, and that continuous improvement in their teaching practice will lead to continuous improvement in their students' ability to demonstrate their learning. So that was all I had, and sorry it was so much. And if anybody has any questions, please let me know.
Marie, this is Wesley. I want to see if you could you repeat the comments that you mentioned about the advanced teacher adult leadership role? I think you said something about making sure teachers understand they will not be teaching 90 students, but would be in more of a leadership role, observing, mentoring, that type of thing. Could you repeat that comment again?
Absolutely, absolutely. So there's been a lot of there's misconceptions that adult leadership teacher would still be teaching students with a full course load in addition to doing all of these other tasks, the mentoring, the co-teaching, the helping teachers use data, the leading PLCs, all the work that those adult leader teachers are going to be doing. So I just want to make sure that we're clear in our messaging and clear in our meetings and clear with our subcommittees that adult leadership teacher, their primary job will shift from working with students, predominantly students, to working with adults. So they're going to be working with the other teachers in their school. By working with the other teachers in their school, they're also going to be working with students, right? Because those teachers will have students assigned to them that adult leadership teacher will be contributing to their education as well. But it wouldn't be like I would be teaching 3 blocks of biology and then also helping all the people in my school improve their teaching practice. My job would primarily shift if I'm one of the adult leadership teachers in my school. My job would shift from teaching 3 class periods of science to working with my colleagues in my school building all day.
And maybe I've missed something in the presentations on the model, but before I didn't really. I mean, I understand the role of the adult teacher leadership, but I also thought they had to maintain, EVOS scores in order to keep that type of license. And so I'm curious of how they would not have to have teaching responsibilities to maintain that.
And I'll defer this to Tom because I think it was either the state board meeting or one of the meetings where he did the presentation of the model. I believe that he said that they would have to change the way that the adult leadership teachers were being evaluated because they would not be working with students predominantly. But Tom, if you want to clarify that, if I didn't get that right.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Dr. Wood. And my response to that is founded in the advanced teaching roles process that's going on throughout the state. We are working with EVOS to create a measure for these adult leadership teachers. So we're not measuring them on just an aggregation of the students, that we're looking at changes in the teachers they're working with. And we're trying to develop this kind of model that could be an EVOS measure, or how we would do that in a more qualitative way. That should be an option as well for those teachers. But the EVOS remained in there because we are looking to develop some kind of quantitative measure of the impact of these folks on the teachers that they're working with. So these teachers are successfully improving their outcomes with students as a result of working with these teachers, that kind of thing, rather than a direct student growth model. I don't know right now if that's going to be successful. If it's not, we definitely have to change the way we think about how they show their impact.
I had a couple other comments. Maureen, I appreciate you making a mention of the feedback from teachers, because I've heard many of the same things I was sharing with Tom and Kim earlier at our subcommittee meeting. And I think the impression that some people maybe are getting is if they're a veteran teacher or a teacher in years 20 through 30, that somehow they've gotten the impression that they're not successful in what they're doing by maybe some of the verbiage that's being used. So I appreciate that. One thing I think it's important to look at when we talk about the advanced leadership roles is just making sure that the General Assembly understands that, we still have to meet class size. We still need the same allotment of teachers that we've had in the past. We won't be able to use an allotted position the way the current model is to meet this need in our schools. And then also, many of us have instructional specialists in our schools that are under the current teacher leadership evaluation. And those folks right now are serving as full-time instructional specialists, instructional coach, mentors in our schools, and they currently, only have observation data. And therefore, I'm trying to figure out in my mind, since they're instructional support, how they will fit into this licensure model, since this is really focused around classroom teachers and not instructional support. So that's just something I think we might to really look at closely too, for districts in those type of scenarios where there's already folks serving in this similar capacity.
Yeah, and that's something I've thought about a little bit too. And, as I considered it, there are some districts that really do have robust instructional coach programs. There's other districts that don't. And so that at this point is kind of an equity issue, because we can't, not every district has the capacity to fund those positions, or to human capital wise to have people to go into those positions. One of the things I think would be great about this model is that would then be happening at the state level. So, and it would also be normalized at the state level. So you wouldn't have, a instructional coach in Cherokee County who's doing something completely different than an instructional coach in Bladen County. They would both, as adult leadership teachers, would have this list of skills and tasks and things that they are expected to do at the state level, which means that the teachers and the kids in Cherokee are getting the same level of support from their adult leadership teachers as the teachers and kids in Bladen. And I think that that's really important for trying to provide those equitable access opportunities for all of our kids and for all of our teachers. But I think, there'll probably be, when we start the program, there will have to be adult leadership teachers in order for this to work. And so, those people that are currently filling those roles, either advanced teaching roles as a multi-classroom leader, or if you have the teachers that are currently serving in instructional coaching roles or instructional leader roles, those may be some of the people that can fill those adult leadership roles as we begin the program.
So this is Tom. I have a question on that, Dr. Wood. You asserted that we can't do a position allotment under this model. I'm curious as to the source of that. Is that an opinion, or is that stated as fact somewhere?
Well, I can speak for our own district that it's pretty much factual when, we cannot, we're having to go into, I mean, I'm not speaking for every district, but we're very conservative with our funding, and I'm trying to figure out how that we can allot out of our current state allotments funding to cover, these positions, but give up a classroom position as well. So if we're going to add an extra layer, so that funding's got to be replaced somewhere to make sure that we're meeting class size requirements in our school. We just don't have the extra. What the bottom line is, we don't have the extra funds to just create an advanced leadership role that does not serve students at this current time. And I think that many districts would agree with that's going to have to come from either local funding or some other state allotment to be able to cover those positions, because we're taking teachers away that normally would be serving students.
I got you. So the more accurate way to state that is, under the current teacher allotment system, this model can't be supported unless legislation changes to reflect an additional layer of educators that are not currently accounted for in the allotment system.
I wouldn't say it can't across the state, because I don't know every school district's financial situations, but I think it would be difficult for many without additional funding to cover the positions.
I got you. And I think that statement is largely true, with a very few notable exceptions, that the current model cannot support this. But I want to be clear that part of this work has always been anticipated that this would require immense changes to current statute around funding and licensing.
Right, and that's my point of bringing it up, is just to make sure it's clear to legislation, if they choose to move forward with this, is that we've got to have funding to make it work more than what we're receiving now at this current state.
Agreed. Thank you for clarifying that.
It seems, so this is Michael. It seems like one of the conversation points that's gotten lost over time. I thought part of the rationale for this kind of change in the way that we think about licensure is really about career trajectory, and the fact that for someone who becomes a teacher, their pathway is kind of stunted, right? You're a teacher, and then if you choose to advance your professional pathway in North Carolina is teacher, vice principal, principal, maybe administrator, central office. But we've never really had opportunities for teachers to remain in the classroom, to serve as leaders in their classrooms. I mean, we talk about teacher leaders in the standards, right? But what kind of opportunities do we give them? And it seems that what we're trying to build here, in part at least, is this career pathway where someone could spend their entire career in a classroom if they chose, and be compensated appropriately for that. So I don't know if anybody else had any thoughts on that.
So this is Tom. Michael, I agree with you, and I think that is the critical point that we need to emphasize when this discussion of merit pay comes up. So I can't get away from the fact that arguably this is, and so, I mean, we are saying we're going to pay people based on their skills and their performance. That kind of is the definition of merit pay, but I think we need to concentrate on what makes this different in the past. In the past, merit pay was just, we're going to throw some additional money at you, but keep the entire organizational structure exactly as it was before. So nothing's changing. We're just going to say, we're going to dangle some dollars in front of you and say, if you meet this benchmark, we'll give you this bonus. And I think that what we're doing is fundamentally different in that we are actively changing the way we support beginning teachers, the supports we provide teachers to develop into the kind of teachers we want them to be, and compensating them appropriately when they meet those standards. I think that's fundamentally different. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that won't see that as fundamentally different. But
Yeah, I agree with that, right? I mean, I'm also having a hard time understanding how you equate this to some merit policy that may or may not have existed 20 years ago. My understanding of merit pay, and you're right? So by definition, merit pay is you meet some performance objective and you're compensated for that. But it seems to me that by and large, a merit pay system is one where a bonus, like you said, is awarded for meeting some set of objectives. And if you don't meet those, you don't get that bonus. I don't know that we're talking about taking pay away from people, right?
Right.
Michael, I think one of the things, I think teachers are just a little scared, a little uneasy because of what they do or don't understand about the model. And I think that they are equating some of this to a one moment point in time, in the event that they, have a year in which is where they don't exceed expectations as they normally would, that this would affect, their pay and their overall livelihood versus a, 3 out of 5 year window, or as an alternative, the principal observation, peer review student survey route that could be taken. So I think if they can understand that if these are things that they're already should be working on, already doing, and they're wanting to grow and promote themselves, then most are not going to have a problem moving through the the model, but I think they're kind of focusing on that one moment in time. And then I think they also are concerned too about with the principal observations, if those observations are going to be valid, you know, is there going to be consistency across the state, across individual schools in the district with those observations? Is there going to be competitiveness of, you know, low performing schools or schools in high poverty, and transition of teachers there, and just a lot of, you know, just some fear. So that may be where that's coming from.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that. Right, I can appreciate we've been through a couple of difficult years. I know how hard. I mean, you know, as you know, I've been traveling the state. We're you know, we understand. I understand. I fully understand the context of the situation that folks are in and the difficulties they're facing. And this sometimes, I guess, could feel like one more thing we're adding on, or we're changing, and it leads to more uncertainty for folks. And I think if we're pretty clear in what this model is and what it isn't, then that can certainly be helpful.
Yeah, and I completely agree. You know, as a teacher who taught during the pandemic, and you know, continues to teach online now, I know there is a lot of fear. No, I wouldn't say fear, but there's concern over how this looks, right? And that concern of what if it's a year where things don't go like they normally do, and will I be held accountable for that as the practitioner? And I think one of the things that I'd really love to highlight here is that, like, I would love to be one of the adult leader teachers like that. I don't want to be an administrator. I want to stay in the classroom. I want to continue working with kids and my colleagues, but I also enjoy being a teacher leader and working with pre-service teachers and working with my beginning teacher mentees and helping them in those beginning years, and then also helping my colleagues who are mid-career or end of career teachers as well, because we all are continuously improving in our practice to meet the demands of our kids and to meet the diverse needs of each of our students. So where I really see this is if there is a teacher who for whatever reason is struggling, whether it's an outside factor, just a classroom environment or dynamic with their students that just is making it a challenging year. And as teachers, we have all had those years where it's been a challenging year. I think that's where your adult leadership teacher would come in and support you through that. So you would have someone there helping you. You would have someone there who's a person to bounce ideas off of. You have someone there who can help you. Maybe if you need to pull some kids into a small group, you would be able to utilize that teacher to help you with that effort. So there's so many benefits, I think, to having that adult leader teacher who it's their main responsibility to help you be a better teacher and to help support you in your teaching practice. And so when you're having a year where maybe it is a little bit of a struggle, or there's some outside factors like COVID-19 that are making things really difficult to connect and reach your students, there would be somebody else there to support you through that, whose job it is to support you through that, and who wants to support you through that, and who has the expertise to support you through that. And I think that's a really important point to keep in mind, is that the AL teacher, if the teachers that they are supporting are not growing in their practice, so if they're not meeting those benchmarks that have been set for them to demonstrate the 3 out of 5 years that they're continuously growing their kids, then your adult leader teacher is not going to be meeting their benchmarks because they're not fully supporting you and helping you grow in your teaching practice. And that's where it comes back to, we would be improving the teaching practice from within. It would be educators working with other educators to improve teaching practice, which would then benefit kids. So it really would be empowering our teachers to support our kids in their learning. And so I think that there's some real, there are definitely a lot of questions. The model still obviously needs work. We still have 3 more months to do that work to get it ready before it's presented to PEPSC. But I do think that if we help teachers understand some of the benefits that will come from this program, and if we help teachers who are in each one of those different license levels understand who the supports are to help them as they grow in their teaching practice, I really do think this is an opportunity for us to revolutionize the way that we support our teachers to support our kids.
Marina, I think you hit on something important there, is that they need to see that this is obtainable. And I think that's what I took from what you were saying there.
Yeah, that's absolutely what I was saying.
I think I asked this question one time before, and I can't really remember the answer, but we talked about, instructional support staff such as counselors, social workers, those positions. Um, so, in my understanding, we would have two different pay scale models. And I'm just curious, Maureen, if you've heard from instructional support staff about any concerns about them not being placed on the model at this time.
I have heard from a couple counselors and school psychologists that have asked, like, where would I fall into this model, and how would I renew my license? And I have not been able to answer that question for them because I don't have the answer. So if I would love to hear anybody who does maybe have some knowledge on how that may look.
So this is Tom, and I think maybe we haven't continued to articulate it, but I think in some of the initial discussions around this, we recognize that this type of work needs to happen for instructional support staff as well as administrators, because we all know that the way this model is presented, that teachers are going to kind of bump up against principals, and especially assistant principals. And how do we I mean, personally, I don't have a problem with a highly skilled advanced leadership teacher making more than assistant principal, but I understand that that's a concern in the field. We have to address those, and that's always been articulated that that work is going to fall under the superintendent's Polaris project. And I also want to articulate classified staff should not be left out of this. Nothing in this model is to suggest that instructional support staff or our classified staff aren't important. I just can't imagine how much time and energy just getting to where we are now with teachers, if we had to deal with all four of those educator groups in order to move this work forward. I just don't know how that would have happened. But my understanding from the superintendent is the teachers have to be done first, and then after I drop this, after this gets on its way, then I've got to turn my attention to the group that's next. And I don't know who that is right now, but that's been articulated to me as that's how it's going to roll. So I've got 3 more of these to do after we get done with the principal. And I hope you're all there with me for those other 3.
And I definitely understand that point of view, Tom. I just, in my mind, I'm a little concerned that, if there is not some equivalence in pay, even for a year or 2, it may take to get those other folks, other areas, reevaluated. We're so much struggle with speech, psychologists, counselors now, and we just don't want to lose folks. It's also very difficult at times to recruit individuals to go into administration, and just don't want this to be have a negative impact on those individuals. And once again, just General Assembly's got to reassure us that the changes that are needed to adjust those salaries in all those levels you mentioned, that they fulfill that obligation, because if one group's left out on down the road, it's going to be have a negative impact on school districts.
I agree.
I just want to stop in and say good morning. I apologize. I've had to step in and out a bunch today, so I have not been able to completely follow along, but I'm here 100% now.
Tom and everybody, this is Van. This goes back a little bit to I think the first point that Maureen made and some of the rhetoric that's out there. I think it's important that we help people see that this is not a tool for weeding people out of the profession. That was said in a commentary out in the media out of Raleigh, that, you know, the good thing about this is it's a new model for preparation, and it's also going to weed people out of the profession. I think the approach to this is it's about building and supporting and affirming good practice. And so how do we help people who want to become teachers become good teachers? And then how do we help good teachers become great teachers? No doubt there will be people who leave the profession in part because of what some of the ramifications of this might be. But I also think this model done well keeps people in the profession who would have quit. So people who might have been struggling with their practice, as Maureen said a second ago, people who are dealing with a sense of efficacy issues, they're not having the kind of impact with children they would like to have, or in their collaboration with their colleagues, the people who are supporting them. This has mechanisms in there for people that we might have lost in the past, not because they got identified as a bad teacher, but because they didn't feel a professional support structure, and they didn't feel a professional growth structure. How can I continue to engage with children as my primary job and engage with teacher practice, but do that in different roles that this model allows for? So I think that, you know, part of that narrative out there that, you know, we've come up with a way to get rid of bad teachers is certainly not how I've approached it. And you know, we haven't talked about it that way in our subcommittee.
Van, I'm really glad you highlighted that, because I could not agree more. I see this as helping every teacher be fully supported so they are able to do their best stuff with kids in classrooms every day, and not removing teachers at all, but supporting teachers to help them be able to match their kids' needs a little bit better.
Right. Also, one other part, understanding that the subcommittees are a combination of people who are in appointed roles like PEPSC and the state board, and many people are not in those kinds of roles. They're professional educators and whatever their position might be. I think it's important that the subcommittees and the people doing this work do it with as much fidelity to what we believe the best structure for the profession can be. And we don't engage, I don't think we should engage in the work of compromising that because we anticipate that there'll be a public criticism out there once this becomes, it is in the hands of PEPSC and the State Board of Education. Their jobs are to do their work within the context of policy interest. Our job is to propose the best model we can that has the most fidelity with what we believe we can do in the profession that's in the best interest of children. I know we're way down the road in terms of trying to, you know, keep those two things in different spaces, but I wouldn't want us to start compromising the model because we think this criticism or this critique or this concern is going to be out there. Seems to me that's more the responsibility of PEPSC proper and the state board to begin to consider those factors. I'm not suggesting we should pay no attention to the critique, but let's make sure we get the best model on the table. We can get it on the table, and then we have those policy. You know, once this becomes public policy, how the model gets changed. I hope that made sense.
It does to me, Van, and I think it recognizes that at some point the between now and the implementation of whatever this is, there will be a lot of political forces coming to bear on that model. And the best model that this group can come up with and put forward, I guess the hope is that after that political compromising happens, we're still left with a pretty good model rather than starting out with a mediocre model and then we end up with something bad after all the political compromising. That approach resonates with me the way you're describing it.
I also think one last comment for the subcommittees, PEPSC, and everybody is, you know, a term that's been greatly overworked in about the last 30 years in public education is paradigm shift. We've called a whole lot of things paradigm shift that were, you know, marginally disruptive. I mean, they were neither paradigm nor shift. This has the potential to be a paradigm shift. And I think that's part of the concern and the stress and the anxiety. The world this describes is it's a different, the professional space is different. That's why we're doing it. That brings anxiety and stress and concern and worry and potentially disillusionment. But that is part of what we know about paradigm shift work. And, you know, part of our responsibility, again, I think Maureen pointed to this earlier, is to the extent that we're proposing what we propose with conviction, we have to be responsible and good stewards of how we help people work through that shift. This is, you know, you don't get many opportunities to actually have a paradigm shift.
This is Tom. I have a question for Maureen. You are planning on doing these the feedback tours with Julie Pittman, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So just to let you know, I did record the kind of high level overview of the plan. That video, we did that on Monday. It's supposed to be ready for you and Julie to review sometime early May, so that so the messaging will be completely consistent and then gives you the space to just kind of have discussion and feedback. And we're working with Julie on the data collection instrument you'll use to have people submit feedback. So we're trying to avoid you guys having to carry around stacks of paper or take copious notes. We're going to try to provide an electronic way to capture all that, so that can come directly back to the subcommittees in a usable fashion. I didn't know if I had explained all that to you or not.
Yeah, Julie's filled me in on all that, but I'll still be taking copious notes because that's just who I am.
Sure, yeah, I appreciate that. And just to let the other subcommittee chairs know, I think there's plans for the governor's office folks to work with. NCAE wants to do some feedback gathering sessions. And I think the proposal is that video also be presented in that way with consistent feedback gathering. So, and then the public school forum has also offered some teacher feedback sessions, and we're working with them to kind of standardize the data collection around that, so everybody is getting kind of the same information. We want to, I mean, we can't require that those other two groups adhere to that, but we're offering that as a suggestion so that, you know, everything's equivalent and framed the same way when it comes back to you as feedback. So I hope that will be helpful to the subcommittees.
Yeah, and if I could just add one thing onto that too, especially just for any teachers who are listening or listening to the recording, you know, the negative feedback is really important for us to get. And we welcome the negative feedback because that's the only way that we're going to develop a good plan. So if you have ideas or negative feedback, like we want to hear that too. Also things that you think are good, but ideas or things that you are pressure points for you or something that you have concern about or something that's unclear, we need to know that, and we welcome that negative feedback as well, because we have to get feedback, all the feedback, in order to develop a plan that works the best for the teachers in our state.
Maureen, I agree, and I think we, as the PEPS Commission, have got to listen to the feedback and, you know, take action as needed from the response from our teachers. I mean, they're the ones impacted, you know, in their eyes the most at this time by this model, and we've got to listen and adjust and take action based on feedback we get, whether it's positive or negative. So I think it's a good point.
We have about 30 minutes left in our meeting, and I just wanted to make sure that there weren't any questions around the subcommittee, the priorities chart here, or any conversation around concerns from subcommittee to subcommittee about things that might overlap into another subcommittee, just to make sure everybody's on the same.
Well, Kim, I can't speak for Dr. Graham on this.
Sure.
He may have more questions than I do, but for our subcommittee specifically, I'm sure if I took 5 minutes and thought about it, I could probably think of a question for each subcommittee and how it's relating to ours. My concern though is where I think we are getting beat up, which we all are, I guess, but where we are getting beat up a little bit is on the amounts and all that, which I don't believe that we arbitrarily set those, but I think in the court of public opinion we may have, and I guess to an extent, I see how that might be the case. But as far as where, I guess I'm struggling in, other than just coming up with new numbers, I think we have done about all, I just think we've done about all we can do as far as, since we were budget and compensation, we've got numbers. I know OSBM can figure up, you know, or I know we've got estimates that we've done, but at the end of the day, if it's OSBM or whomever that comes up with that final number, but what else can we do again, other than just editing numbers? Sure, there's some questions about out of state. There's questions about roles other than the classroom teacher or a teacher leader. So, you know, how does this impact the administrative role, which right now is, outside the scope of our work. But, and I'd ask the other subcommittee co-chairs that as well, as far as budget compensation, what else do we need to do from our committee perspective? And I'm not trying to take the easy way out, but we've just dealt with money, and money is numbers, and we didn't deal a lot with policy, I don't think.
Hey, Aaron, and
Oh, go ahead.
sorry, Kim.
Maureen. No, it's okay. Go ahead.
All I was going to say is there's still a lot of questions around why this does not affect national board certification pay, and why it would not affect the grandfathered in master's pay. So I don't. Those might be areas. I don't know if that would like technically fall under you guys or if it fall under somebody else. But that's the only thing that I've the feedback that I've gotten from a couple of, actually several teachers, is concern about how that looks and why this model does not affect those. So that might be one thing for your subcommittee, but I'm not really sure.
Yeah, and I think we can talk about that. And Tom, correct me if I'm wrong. I know that probably is an outstanding issue, but if it's percentage wise, which national board and masters are, is the easy out just to add the percentage to where they're at. And I'm trying to think if I know we've talked about it, but I don't know that how far in the weeds we got with it.
Or Aaron, could we include those as in the model as a measure?
Right, and that way it ensures that the compensation goes up.
Well, I think and Wesley, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're pointing at two separate questions related to master's degrees and national board certification. And the first is, are they demonstrations of effectiveness? And if so, that they need to be handled by the licensure committee. Is this an evidence of a teacher's skill or competency? And that is definitely for the licensure committee to take up. But then I think the other question goes to your committee, Dr. Fleming, and that is, does this model need to explicitly articulate that a national board, the recommendation of this model is that national board be a salary differential on top of these things, as it is currently written in legislation, or is it, and same thing for master's degrees. And we have left that alone, not because that was a choice that we took in drafting the model. But that doesn't mean that the subcommittees cannot take that issue up by any stretch of the imagination. We just considered those things to be, direct legislated differentials provided by the General Assembly and not under the purview of policy per se. And our assumption was they would continue at the discretion of the General Assembly. But I do see the issue with, I do see how us ignoring that could be construed as a recommendation for removal of that.
Right, because we didn't mention it, that means we want to get rid of it, so to speak. I think that
the absence of any statement
right.
has been interpreted as,
Yes.
As our lack of recommendation, and I get that.
Yeah,
So, well,
sorry, Tom.
Just one more little point on that. We need to think about, with that budget and compensation, if you do put that in there, we need to think about how it is conducted currently, and that is the 12% is on the teacher's salary at the A level. So what would that look like in terms of, is it 12.5% on the salary of a license 3 teacher, a license 4 teacher, or, that recommendation would have to be worked out as well, because if we mirror it to how it is currently done, it would not be 12.5% on whatever license you currently hold. It would be 12.5% on what's considered to be kind of the lowest level You see what I'm getting at?
You'll have to explain that one in our committee tomorrow,
Okay. All right.
Well, and
because I don't know that I can do that.
and I
Yeah,
may
see
have
what you're saying.
unintentionally opened a can of worms. What I was really referring to was having some intentional like language that's part of like looking at those numbers across the bottom and seeing what you'll make at each level. That national board certification and grandfather's master's pay exist in other statutes separate from licensure, and that this is looking at changing the licensure law, not changing the national board certification and the grandfathered master's pay. Since those exist in separate statute, you would still receive that 12% differential in the master's degree pay based on a separate law. And I'm sorry if I caused some confusion there, but that's really what I meant.
I got you.
And another thing too that I've thought about, because a lot of teachers have asked about, well, I'm working on a master's degree or I'm working on national board certification. So could those be somehow built in, as Tom was saying, into licensure? Like the not that you have your national board certification, but if you need to demonstrate data-driven instruction that you have passed component 2 of your national board certification, or you are currently working on component 2 and you submit your narrative and your video as your evidence, or you're in a master's degree program and you had to do an action research project. So you submit your action research project paper along with your demonstration of how it changed your teaching practice, the evidence you collected, how you analyzed it, and then a copy of your transcript showing that you got a B or higher in the course. So I think there's maybe some creative ways that we could include the work that teachers are doing already as part of their evidence of effectiveness, or their evidence of continuing to improve their students through the work they're doing for those other programs that they're working in. But it would definitely have to demonstrate your ability to take what you've learned from doing that class or completing that component to demonstrate how that is impacting the kids that you're teaching.
I like all of that. I just don't know that falls under our committee, but I kind of like that, Marie.
No, it doesn't. It would fall under, I think, probably licensure and probably also under advancement and development as we work on the competencies for each level, I think. Is that correct, Tom?
Presumably, yeah. So a couple things that, Aaron, there was something I wanted to say to you that I want to make sure I get in before I address this letter issue. Alexis Schaus, the CFO for NCDPI, I have gotten her up to speed on where we are. I think at this time now, we know that the model is at least got some structure enough to it for her to come in and start talking about costing. And so she should be attending your next sessions and kind of gathering from the district, from the subcommittee, a better understanding of this, so she can start working on the costing out of it, which I think is the right time and the right thing for you guys to work on moving forward in your last 3 meetings, because we did this general kind of swipe at what this would cost. She's going to be much more detailed, and I've given her some of the background, but that should be kind of the focus of your group for the next couple of meetings, is working that out. And where she sees that some things need to be nailed down a little harder, she might push you on that. So I hope that makes sense on kind of what your goal is towards the end run here. As I know, this is really hard for people to understand, because in anything, the devil is in the details. But I think I have to go back to the fact that this is a policy framework for how something like this could happen. This is not meant to minimize the work that everybody's done, but in my mind, this is tip of the iceberg. There is so much implementation around this. Once we understand what the law is going to look like to support this, there has to be a ton of policy work with the State Board of Education to clear, to make to really finalize this plan, I think we're trying to make everything out of what should be an overall policy recommendation, with the understanding that all these questions about can National Board Certification Stage 2 substitute for those have to be worked out in policy. And it's just it's another huge piece of getting this moved forward. And I know that's dissatisfying to teachers, but we're gonna drive ourselves crazy if we try to answer every granular implementation question and logistics question around this. It has to be a little higher than that, up at the policy realm.
Tom, this is Van, and everybody to follow that. I want to pick up on something I think it was Wesley and Maureen said earlier. I think we should absolutely be attentive to all of the responses that will come back to subcommittees, PEPSC, and the participants in this process. I do think in the stage we're in right now, to Tom's point, there is a difference between comments and feedback. People speaking to the potential holistic impact of the structure of things is different from people responding to language that's being drafted, this particular bullet or this particular component of a subcommittee's work. And so I'm interpreting from this conversation, when we get back into our subcommittee, we're taking the language that's in the PowerPoint slides and we are reviewing and refining that from the points of view of people on the subcommittee, which includes representatives of the constituent groups that are providing us feedback. So number one, I think it's important that we're able to discern general comments about what we're doing and feedback about the architecture of the model that Tom just spoke to. I think the second piece is with the subcommittees themselves, and hopefully Hank and I are going to talk about this with our subcommittee. We're at a point where it's really critical to be proactive in language. If we don't like something that has been drafted, we need to change the language of that to reflect what the members of the subcommittee believe is the most important thing to do relative to the profession in North Carolina. And how do we really focus on making sure that language that's in that PowerPoint, because right now it seems that's the language structure we're working with, that we are refining language versus going back to original questions from when this whole. It doesn't mean we're dismissing the questions. It just means that for now we're down to the part of the process where we're refining that language. And I hope that's a turn that we took in our subcommittee a few months ago, that we had to become more declarative and less inquiry oriented, because we were starting to write recommendations. And I think we're down to 3 months, and it's going to be critical that, at least in our subcommittee's case, we make sure that language that goes to PEPSC expresses the best work of the preparation and entry as our subcommittee, that language over the next 3 months gets fine-tuned to articulate what we think is important. So I think there's a delicate balance of public feedback, and we want to be respectful of all of it, and public comments, and how that gets translated into revision to the proposal. I did not mean to drop the mic.
All right, Kim may be away from her computer for a second. So
No, I'm
oh,
not. I'm
there-
not. I was typing a message.
I have less tolerance for uncomfortable silence than you do, I guess.
I wanted to give people a moment to process. It's been a lot of information. But it is 12:16, and if we don't have anything else that we want to bring to the table, we can get back 14 minutes of our day. I really appreciate all of the hard work that you've been doing for the subcommittees and for PEPSC, and also to develop this model. And thank you for being here for this joint co-chair meeting. I wanted to ask if we want to make this a monthly meeting, and I will make sure to schedule that as far out as possible, along with the remaining subcommittee meetings. Please make sure that you fill out the doodle poll that I sent, I believe, yesterday. But are we for more joint meetings as co-chairs?
And Kim, just for tomorrow, I'm gonna join, but I may be on the road and I'm not sure.
That's okay.
Hopefully you'll hear me fine and all, but I'm going from one place to another, so I'm kind of all over tomorrow. But anyway, I just want to let you know that in case I'm on or off or whatever. Thank you.
Okay. No problem. That happens all the time. No problem. So any thoughts on future joint meetings?
This is Maureen. I think the joint meetings are very helpful. So if everybody else works to their schedules, I would love to do the meetings monthly if that's possible.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I will look into it.
And Kim, if that PowerPoint structure is going to be how we're now capturing what ultimately becomes the recommendation, I think if we're looking at that in these joint meetings, to know what's going on across the subcommittees, it would be really helpful to me.
That absolutely, Van. I will definitely make sure that that is updated and brought to the attention of the co-chairs. There were no decisions made with the first meetings, but however, I think that that will be different for the May meeting. So I will bring that to your attention and hopefully send that to you prior to the joint meeting. So any other comments? Last call.
Yes, I just checked the chat. I'm sorry to hold this up. In our co-chairs meeting that Hank Weddington and Andrew and Kim and Tom just had a little while ago, we talked about the importance of the InTask standards and what that has meant in our subcommittee, and how InTask as a set of standards then streams out into license 4 and the licenses beyond, and how in the InTask language and the expectations that are tied to InTask in terms of teacher practice standards and things we do in educator preparation, that ensuring that InTask remains sort of a fixed variable in this across the different spaces we're working in, because it's the most common language we all come back to.
I think that makes sense.
Are the other subcommittees good with that?
Kim, do we have those standards as a resource for all the subcommittees?
I think we've had those. I can definitely dig them
Okay.
out of our resources. So they are floating around. And I can send that out to all of the co-chairs. Thanks, Van, for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to give everybody back 10 minutes of their day, and thank you so much for coming to the meeting.
Thank you, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Buddy.
Thanks, everybody.